Hello everybody, welcome to Tuesday's calendar. Now Tuesday, of course, is traditionally budget day, but as all smokers, drinkers and indeed housewives will know, this year budget day is tomorrow. And tonight we'll be wondering how the Chancellor of the Exchequer will be doing it. The British Olympic team have just decided to accept the invitation to go to Moscow. We've an interview on that. Soccer, Leeds United manager Jimmy Adamson and the club's directors survived, and believe me, that's the word, survived a stormy shareholders meeting last night. Well, I was there, and so will Yorkshire Evening Post sports editor Mike Casey, and we'll be bringing you a full report. And of course, we've got all the day's news, and we start with that. Here's Geof.
Sheffield Crown Court has been told how workers at a Chesterfield plastics factory suffered an allegedly frightening list of health problems after being exposed to chemical fumes. The workers were employed at Vinatex near Staveley and had been exposed to fumes from vinyl chloride, which is used in the manufacture of PVC. As a result, some of the men are said to have become impotent, others have suffered blood disorders, aching joints, migraines, bone disease and clubbing of the fingers. 7 of the men who were involved in the processing and bagging of the chemical in the early 1970s are now suing Vinatex for damages. The court was told that initially 22 employees had claimed against the firm, but most of these had now settled. The settlements varied from £40,000 for the most seriously affected to £5,000 for those only slightly affected. The hearing is expected to last several days. 300 tons of steel were moved from an Immingham stockholders' warehouse today, despite a strong picket of striking steelmen. Yesterday, clashes between police and pickets resulted in 6 arrests outside the warehouses of Humberside Sea and Land Services. But today, the steel escaped the pickets in lorries which a Midlands firm, Supreme Steels, had brought in. A report now from Alan Hardwick.
Pickets stationed themselves outside the gates early this morning, determining that no steel should leave the premises. There were, according to the pickets, more than 1,000 tons in the yard. Early on, heavy earth-moving equipment was moved into position to block both gates, and it looked as though a stalemate had been reached. But after a few hours, when police heavily outnumbered the pickets, one machine was moved, and, I think to all the pickets' surprise and dismay, lorries left in convoy. I asked Ted Hardwick, the local ISTC official, why the steel movement had been allowed to take place.
This firm came up here using scab lorry drivers, non-union lorry drivers, and drivers who were purporting to be members of my own organisation, which they weren't, to try to move 1,200 tonne of steel. They've moved 300 and they'll move no more. And I consider that to be a moral victory. The only thing that is very distasteful to me is that this final episode should have happened, which is tending to ruin any faith in law and order that these pickets of ours have got.
Do you agree? Yeah. I put Mr. Hardacre's accusations to Humberside's Assistant Chief Constable, Mr. Leonard Barker, and Mr. Barker strongly denied there'd been any cooperation with the drivers or any police connivance. He said, we're simply here to react to certain situations.
2 Rotherham pickets, who led a crowd of more than 200 storming a police cordon outside Hadfield's private steel plant in Sheffield, were each fined £75 by the city's magistrates today. Michael Harrison, aged 45, and Colin Walker, aged 34, pleaded guilty to threatening behaviour. They were ordered to pay the fines at £1 a week until they returned to work, and then at £7 a week. The number of unemployed in the region has not increased since last month, but 6 out of 100 still don't have jobs. In Yorkshire, Humberside, Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire, that adds up to nearly 170,000 people out of work. At this time of the year, with the weather improving, unemployment figures usually drop. 6th formers at a Leeds school are to be screened for tuberculosis after a 17-year-old boy was found to have the disease. About 150 pupils at Cardinal Heenan High School, Meanwood, may be affected, and letters have been sent to their parents. Teachers at the 1,100 pupil school are also being offered a check-up. The boy with TB has been in hospital for 4 weeks. It's the 3rd outbreak of TB at a northern school this month. The others involve a 16-year-old girl from Sheffield and 9 pupils from Salford. In North Yorkshire, a big police search is going on in the Asenby area near Thirsk for a man who's been missing since last Thursday. He's 49-year-old Brian Scholes, who was last seen near his home at Orchard Cottages in Asenby. Vivian Mackison reports.
A police frogman team have been searching the River Swale around Asenby since Friday for 49-year-old road worker Brian Scholes, who's been missing from his home since Thursday evening. I asked Mr. Scholes' daughter what sort of personality her father has.
Well, he's very well liked, and he doesn't have any enemies, and he's just very, yeah, he's a very placid sort of, well, that's his nature, isn't it?
Have you got any ideas yourself what could have happened to him?
No, not all, no, it's just a complete mystery. I just don't really know. I honestly don't.
As far as you know, is there anything that you can think of that he might have had a problem over that could have worried him?
Only that he had an accident at work, and that that might, you know, maybe if it could be delayed shock from that, because there's no reason. I mean, he's happy at home, and him and my mum get on really well, and there's just no reason for him to go. No reason at all.
What is the feeling amongst the family at the moment while they are looking for your father?
There's, you know, they just can't understand anything about it. They just don't know what to believe, really. But I'm hoping that he's just had a mental blockage and that he's just wandered off somewhere and that he comes back. Because I don't think my dad would go in the river. He's not that tight. He wouldn't hurt my mum and me and everybody else.
The majority of hospitals throughout the region will be hit by a one-day strike of radiographers on Thursday. Routine appointments in many X-ray departments have been cancelled and emergency services will be limited. The radiographers are protesting at the recommendations of the Clegg comparability study into their pay and conditions. They say the report would mean them working longer hours for the same pay. 50 office workers picketed the Sheffield cutlery works of Viners today after 12 colleagues had been made redundant. They included managers, clerical and supervisory staff. A spokesman for their union, the ASTMS, claimed they'd been given notice only half an hour before they were due to go home last night, and that the management had failed to consult the union. The union is threatening to call out another 450 workers. The Yorkshire Miners' President, Arthur Scargill, will be giving evidence to the Commons Select Committee on Employment after all. Mr. Scargill had refused after being told that he would not be allowed to make a preliminary speech, although by refusing he could have been in contempt of Parliament. But today he received a telegram from the committee saying he had misunderstood their intentions and he would be able to speak out on picketing before being questioned. Richard Whiteley spoke to him just after he received the telegram.
Well, Mr. Scargill, that's the telegram you received this morning, which basically says you can go and make a 10-minute speech before the committee questions you. Why is it so important for you to make this speech?
Well, two reasons. First of all, in their original invitation to me, the committee agreed that I could make an initial oral submission. And secondly, I understand that Conservative members of the Select Committee indicated after that invitation had been received that they were not prepared to allow me to make that submission. On those two principal counts, it was important that I stood up and said that I would not go down to the Select Committee unless they adhered to their original invitation.
A tremendous fuss has been made about this, and you've talked about being willing to go to prison and so on and so forth. Is it really that important?
Well, of course it's that important. If it's not that important, why have the Select Committee changed their decision and said that I could not give oral evidence? Because it is they and not me who have changed their minds. Now, having done that, I was perfectly right to challenge their decision and to stand up for what I thought was an important principle. They have now reverted to their original position, and I'm perfectly willing to go down, give evidence and answer questions.
Police looking for a youth after a Doncaster bus was badly damaged by fire last night. The bus stopped in Bolby Road after a passenger spotted smoke coming from a back seat. 50 passengers fled as flames swept the top deck. A youth of about 19 had got off at the previous stop. Trawlers have been quick to take advantage of Hull's efforts to keep the fish dock open. Following the decision by the Docks Board that the charge for landing fresh fish in Hull is being reduced to £12.60, 3p a tonne, 2 trawlers will be landing catches there next week. On Monday, 11,000 stones to be landed by the Arctic Reaver, and on Tuesday an Icelandic vessel will unload 16,000 stones, mostly cod. A forecast that the Airedale Trunk Road inquiry could last until October if objectors continued with their long-winded cross-examination of expert witnesses was made today. The inquiry inspector, Mr. Raymond Chance, opened the 8th week of the hearing in Shipley by expressing his concern about the inquiry's slow progress. He said the inquiry was costing thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money every week, and he felt money could be saved if objectors took a more realistic approach to cross-examination.
With the steel dispute about to enter its 13th week, the two sides have now agreed on one more attempt to try to break the deadlock. BSC's chief executive, Mr. Bob Scoley, and leaders of the 13 steel unions have tentatively agreed to the setting up of a committee of inquiry. However, the unions have already made it clear they aren't prepared to return to work before the committee reports, and the steel chiefs have made it equally clear there's no extra money on offer. So what exactly can the inquiry achieve?
With me now is South Yorkshire Strike Committee spokesman Stan Sheridan. Mr Sheridan, I get the impression that the union side are less than enthusiastic about this court of inquiry. Would that be true?
Yes, I don't think there's any doubt that it has been felt that this is the last hope for any settlement without taking further industrial action by the whole of the trade union movement. So, quite clearly, BSC has made an offer of 10% without strings. We believe that that 10% without strings is halfway towards our claim of 20% without strings.
Are you suspicious, then, of what the Commission of Inquiry might come up with at the end of its findings?
Not really, because we have spelt it out quite clearly that the Committee of Inquiry findings isn't binding on either the trade union or BSC.
Don't you think it should be? Isn't that the point of arbitration, that it should be
Well, really,
binding?
it isn't arbitration as such. We believe that a Committee of Inquiry based solely on the wages front is bound to fail. If it took in all aspects of BSC management, etc., and the running of BSC, then we feel it would have took an extensive, long period of time to meet and put forward any plans.
So it seems really this is only really a half-hearted attempt at trying to get it settled, really.
Not really. It was our coordinating committee met last Friday, and they agreed that a committee of inquiry should be held under the auspices of Jim Pryor. But Her Majesty's government have rejected completely, as they say, any interference. We know that they are controlling the purse strings, and they are spelling out to BSC that there's no way the BSC are going to put any more money in the kitty.
The BSC have suggested you go back to work for a flat payment of 10% while this court sits.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we went back to work for 10%, the Committee of Inquiry could quite easily say that's all you're getting. And it's very difficult to restart a strike once a strike has ended. And we are fairly clear that we must continue with the strike until we reach an honourable settlement, and we believe it should be around the 20% without any strings.
Well, look, it's 13 weeks now, and there's talk now of it not remotely ending before Easter with all the commissions of inquiry and so on. I mean, is there still, among your members, honestly, the will to prolong this strike?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt. Our executive and the Central Negotiating Committee of both the NUB and the ISTC rejected in total the last package and rejected in total a return to work. And they are taking forward the views, not only of the people who are on the picket line, but people who have attended all their normal branch meetings over the past few weeks.
You yourself, if I may say so, look terribly tired now.
Well, I think anybody after 13 weeks on strike should be tired. If they aren't tired, then there's something wrong with them.
Stan Sheridan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for part one. In a minute or two, more news from your part of the region, plus football and reaction from one of the country's top athletic coaches to the news that the British Olympic team have accepted the invitation to go to Moscow.
If you can't get it together in your jeans, or there's too much going on behind the scenes, get it to Falmouth!
Sit it like a skin.
They won't give you aggravation or stop your circulation, cause if you're in between size, Falmouths have your jeans size, they'll fit you like a brand new denim glove. All the real charmers get their backsides into Falmouths, cause Falmouths are the jeans that really fit. Falmouths jeans fit to be seen.
Hello, it's me. I'm McVie. It's time to pick the Jaffa cakes. Whoops, they're ripe. The plain chocolate's just the right shade, the sponge is crisp and light, and that smashing, orangey bit in the middle. All ready for you, Jaffa cake fans.
You always pick Jaffa cakes, don't you?
No, McVie does.
McVitie's Jaffa Cakes. The pick of the crop.
Welcome back to more news. The market at Yeadon near Leeds is to close on Friday. Northern Markets, a Manchester firm who leased the market rights from Leeds City Council, have been given notice to quit when their lease runs out at the end of the week. Vivian Mackison reports.
The twice-weekly market in Yeadon's Town Square will close on Friday. The market has been held on this site for nearly 10 years, but Leeds City Council say it must close. Although they have promised to build a permanent market, no date has been set to provide a replacement for the Town Square site. A petition has been started by the stallholders, protesting at the closure. I asked some of them how they felt about the shutdown.
Well, it's crazy. Up till now, Leeds Council have had an income from this market. It's run by Northern Markets, who presumably pay rent for the land. Now, they want to take it over. As soon as they take over, they have to spend money, and they'll lose money, they'll sit on loads of extra staff, lose money straight away.
Would you, as a stallholder, like to see a more permanent site for the market?
I'm not bothered, either way, it doesn't matter. As long as there's a market here, it's a very good market.
How will it affect your livelihood?
It'll take possibly 20% of it away, just like that.
Well, I think it's diabolical. I think it'll spoil the whole character of Yeed. I think the people can't afford the bus fares to go into town. I think they much prefer to stay in their own hometown and do the shopping there.
Well, I think it's absolutely disgraceful.
Is the closure going to affect your livelihood?
Well, it'll certainly affect it. I mean, I'm dependent on this.
I think it's diabolical. I mean, we've been here now since it opened, and we've come every day, we've come in all this bad weather, we've come all the winter last year, which was really bad, and now they're trying to close it down.
Do you feel that you should have been consulted about the closure?
Yes, I do. Yes. We haven't been told anything.
What form will your protest take against the closure?
We will come every week until we're actually turned off.
A spokesman for Leeds City Council said today that they hope to start work on a permanent market site in Yeadon Town Centre next month. Rush hour traffic in Bradford was delayed this morning after an articulated lorry overturned in the city's ring road. The accident happened on Smiddles Lane and the road was closed to traffic for 6 hours. Workmen had to unload the trailer before the vehicle could be moved. All traffic between Manchester Road and Little Horton Lane was diverted and a long tailback of traffic developed. Wakefield District Council has pulled out of a scheme to save the remains of a Roman bathhouse discovered at Castleford. The intention was that the District Council should erect a protective building over the site and eventually incorporate it in the museum. A barrier was also to be built to prevent flooding. The County Council has already spent about £100,000 diverting a new bypass which would have destroyed the bathhouse. Now the District Council has told county councillors that, because of the financial crisis, it can't allocate any more money to the scheme. One of Doncaster's oldest churches is to be given a facelift at the age of 800. After all those centuries, All Saints Parish Church in the hamlet of Alston needs extensive repairs, particularly to its stonework. The vicar, the Reverend Mark Seacombe, is also looking forward to the inside of the church being given a new look. The Department of Environment will foot most of the bill. In Sheffield, an urgent appeal has gone out for a doggy foster mum to save the lives of 5 orphaned pups. The retriever pups, which are only 4 days old, aren't expected to live unless another dog can be found quickly. Their mother died yesterday, and since then 3 of the litter of 8 have died and the others have deteriorated. Their owner, Mrs. Pat Staniforth of Foxhill, Sheffield, is feeding them with an eyedropper. Well, if you want to contact Mrs. Staniforth, she lives in Midhurst Road, Foxhill, Sheffield. York has for the first time cut the money allowed for uncovering its historic past. The city's policy committee today decided to grant only £6,000 to York Archaeological Trust next year. That's £11,000 less than this year and £18,000 less than the trust wanted to help to pay for excavating the Viking settlement in Coppergate, York. Now, Geof.
Last night, Leeds United manager Jimmy Adamson and the board faced angry shareholders at the club's annual meeting, just 2 days after the side was watched by under 15,000 people. Richard Whiteley wasn't one of those, but he was at last night's meeting.
Well, it was the 59th meeting of the club, but it was surely the first to attract so much interest and pent-up expectancy. Manny Cussons, the chairman, wasn't there. He was under doctor's orders. He was ill. The Vice President, Raina Barker, opened the proceedings slightly apprehensively, perhaps aware that the attendance of about 60 signified a deep concern for the future of the club. Last year's minutes were read, at which meeting the club had expressed confidence in its then new manager, Jimmy Adamson, saying that Leeds now had strong management. And Mr. Adamson, in his statement then, had said that he looked forward to future success. Profit last year had been over £100,000. This year's losses total £820,000. The financial statement was greeted with a deep hush. And then, from the floor, there was a proposal from Dr. Aubrey Sher that the account should not be passed, that the manager, Jimmy Adamson, should be sacked, and that the whole board of directors should be replaced. This would show the true feeling of the supporters and the shareholders. Well, the accounts were passed, but only just by 3 votes, with 14 abstentions. And during the debate, there was hostile and intensely personal criticism of Mr. Adamson from the floor. Why had he sold Frank Gray and John Hawley? Where was the spirit of leadership? What were the Scouts doing? Why had their negotiations with Kevin Keegan failed? What had happened to team spirit and morale? What was wrong with the coaching staff? What was Mr Adamson's own track record? Did he consider himself to be the man to be successful at Leeds? And if so, why? Well, Mr Adamson sat through all this, taking it silently, and then it came his turn to spoke. Slowly and defiantly and with dignity. He attacks and he defended. Soccer is very difficult these days, he said. It's difficult to buy new players. Prices are just ridiculous. A youth policy takes time. A lot of people at the meeting didn't know what they were talking about. He was the man to lead Leeds to success. If he didn't do it next year, his job was on the line, and he knew it. He wanted leadership, and he should give it. Leeds' fortunes were his responsibility. He was to blame. The directors never interfered. They gave him a free hand. Well, there was humour, though. The wittiest remark, I think, of the evening. One man, angry at the anonymity of the coaching staff, said, "Ask anyone who is Leeds United's coach, and they'll tell you Wallace Arnold." Well, Mike Casey of the Evening Post was also at the meeting. Do you think that meeting will have done any good?
No, I just have this terrible fear that the board and the management and the manager haven't got the message, and that is basically that the fans are staying away in their thousands because they're not satisfied with what's being served up.
Well, I mean, if they haven't got the message, I mean, it just seemed pretty incredible after 77 minutes of pretty solid message giving last night.
Sorry, you use the word incredible, but I agree with you, Richard. You saw what happened.
It must be said, I think, really, that Mr Adamson personally, quite an ordeal, I would have thought, to hear himself abused and publicly criticised for over half an hour, and then to have to stand up and face those people and give a pretty strong account for himself.
I thought it showed great strength of character, that he could take all this abuse and then stand up and face his detractors. And I think if some of that venom could be turned on the players, we might get better results. They might start climbing the table.
He said that he wanted players to spill blood for the club. Do you think in the squad at the moment there are any players who are prepared to do that?
Not their own blood, no. I can't see that. No, I can't.
He also said, of course, his theme is, you know, it's very difficult these days, and what can you do, and players are expensive, and it's difficult to do this and do that. It must be said, other clubs seem to manage it, so why can't Leeds?
Well, I think basically that there's a second division, a small-town mentality at the club at the moment. And until that is changed, and I think the only way you'll get them to change that is by getting new blood, not spilt blood, but new blood onto the board.
Of course, there was also, it should be said, support for Jimmy Adamson.
By an anonymous
well, fair enough, but yes, he didn't give his name, but he did appeal for unity, and he did say that Leeds are 11th in the league table at the moment, but there are about 70-odd other clubs below Leeds who wish they were 11th as well in the First Division.
Yes, true, but what really gets my goat is that they're asking for blind allegiance, and I don't think in this day and age you can expect it.
Well, Mike Casey, it's been quite a day, 24 hours for Leeds, and we'll see what happens. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, drinkers, smokers and housewives can hardly be unaware that tomorrow is Budget Day, and that today is the day of the traditional Beat the Budget rush. Over the years, the British public has learned through bitter experience that certain goods, like tobacco and booze, are bound to bound up. But last year, if you remember, it was all a little bit different. Then people dashed out to snap up colour televisions and fridge freezers, only to find that it wasn't just the luxury goods that were hit. Instead, the Chancellor shocked us by imposing 15% VAT on all but the most basic items. Well, ever since then, one industry at least has been campaigning to get that tax removed. The confectionery industry claims the Chancellor is directly responsible for the fall in the demand for sweets.
Can you tell me, are you still buying sweets these days?
Not so many, no. A lot fewer than I used to.
Why is that?
Well, I think they're expensive, really, for what they are. I mean, 13p for a small bar, I think, is a lot of money, really.
Over what period of time have you noticed the price of sweets go up?
Particularly in the last 6 months, I would say, really.
Well, I don't eat sweets particularly myself, and I've cut down on the children's sweets.
Why is that?
Well, mainly because they are getting too expensive, and, you know, people in general cut down on a lot of things at the moment.
Until recent months, the British confectionery industry has been an industry on the up and up. Every year we spend an estimated £2,000 million munching our way through 800,000 tonnes of sweets and chocolates, making confectionery one of the biggest industries in the country. Now that's all started to change. Since June last year, when Chancellor Geoffrey Howe increased VAT from 8 to 15%, we've eaten 3% fewer chocolates and 5% fewer sweets. Rowntree Mackintosh has put more than 3,500 workers in Castleford and Halifax on short time. Collard and Bowser in Doncaster are on a 3-day week. 3,000 sweet makers at Bassett's in Sheffield and Pontefract are on reduced time, and Trebor's Chesterfield factory has cut shifts and scrapped a £1.5 million investment project.
Well, there are a variety of reasons, but I think the most important one is the effect of the government doubling the tax on sweets last June. They increased the tax from 8% to 15%, and that now means that confectionery is 15% more expensive than any other type of food, and we think that's a very unreasonable burden for chocolate and sweet manufacturers to have to bear to compete with other foods at such a disadvantage.
Now, you're asking the government to take VAT off sweets and confectionery, but surely our dentists will be absolutely thrilled that we're all eating less sweets.
Well, yes, you're into the issue of sweets rot the teeth. There was quite an interesting research project done, a clinical project done in Scotland on 3,000 children, and they examined their teeth in samples of those who were eating about 5 ounces of sweets a week up to 25 ounces of sweets a week. And there was no significant difference in the dental caries in those particular groups of children. And therefore, it's not entirely proven that the more confectionery you eat, the worse your teeth are.
But you're asking the government to treat sweets in exactly the same way as they treat food. Surely you can't really argue that sweets are a vital part of our diet.
Well, we have milk, we have butter, sugar, glucose, nuts, raisins. What's not vital? They're an absolutely normal part of anyone's diet. Why pick on confectionery?
Can you tell me, do you eat as many sweets as you always did?
Yeah.
Katrina Rance reporting. Well, the British Olympic Association are to accept the invitation to send a team to compete in the Moscow Olympic Games. That decision was made late this afternoon and comes despite a letter from the Prime Minister asking the association to boycott the Olympics. Sir Dennis Follows, who's chairman of the Olympics Association, said the decision had not been taken lightly. They had taken note of the views expressed in Parliament and by the public and the competitors themselves. Well, with Roger Greenwood now is top Great Britain athletics coach Wilf Paish.
Wolf, you've heard the news. We are going to Moscow. Are you surprised?
No, not at all. I would say that was totally predictable, and I can now go and work with my athletes tonight, knowing full well that the major barrier towards them competing in Moscow has been removed.
Are you pleased?
I am pleased, yes, because I am pledged to a governing body who are pledged to make sure that the athletes have every chance of going to the Olympic Games, and I support them completely because that is what my job is, and I've totally invested myself in the future career of athletes.
Are you convinced it's what the athletes and the sportsmen and women want?
Oh yes, I'm convinced that it's what the sportsmen and women want, and that's what that decision was that came through from those people. It wasn't their own personal decision, it was the decision of the sports, which represents young people.
Now, you're, of course, employed by the government, so how do you react? I mean, where do you stand in all this?
Well, I'm indirectly employed by the government, and as long as my employers, who support the British Olympic Committee, take a team and they say that I'm part of that team, then I will be very happy to go along with them.
Fundraising, of course, has been in limbo for the last few weeks, few months, in fact. Where does it leave us? We are obviously short of money. Are we going to send a small team?
Well, this will be the main problem now. As I said, the major obstacles out the way. That certainly is. But now the athletes have got to qualify, and they've got to qualify very well, because I sense that we will probably be short in cash, and we'll certainly send a smaller team than that predicted. Unless, of course, we suddenly have a public fund set up and that everyone puts their hands in their pockets and start to contribute to athletes going to the Olympics.
Normally, Wilf, of course, our athletes are heroes whenever they leave to compete in the Olympics. This time, will they inevitably be considered traitors by many?
I don't think that, no. The athletes won't look at it that way at all. That's probably an adult, and I mean a very adult philosophy. All of the people involved in sport are youngsters, and I don't think they'll view it with that in mind at all. What they might consider is that if America and some of those countries don't go, well, the medal might be a little hollow, but an Olympic medal is an Olympic medal.
Enjoy yourself in Moscow. Wilf,
Thank you very much, Ron.
Today's main news headlines now, and as you've just been hearing, the British Olympic Association is to accept an invitation to send a team to compete in the Moscow Olympics. Dr. Albert Renzi has been enthroned as the Archbishop of Canterbury, And Sheffield Crown Court has been told in a civil claim that workers at a Staveley plastics factory suffered a frightening list of health problems after being exposed to chemical fumes. Richard.
Albert, I'm sure it must be Robert, but perhaps it is Albert, I don't know. Anyway, news about tomorrow night's programme, when, of course, we'll be looking at the budget. Now, I'll be in our London studio with MPs, Geof will be here getting local reaction, and Marylyn will be outside Leeds Town Hall with our outside broadcast crew. So if you want your say, meet her there from 3 o'clock onwards. That's calendar tomorrow. See you then.
And this is the weather picture. Clear periods tonight will lead to a ground frost and icy patches in places. After the clearance of early morning mist or fog, tomorrow will be another day of sunny periods and scattered showers. Temperatures will be near normal, with a maximum of 10 degrees centigrade, 50 Fahrenheit. Winds remaining light, south to southwest, throughout. And that's the latest weather forecast.